My name was Terran Voke, and I've been dead for 32 years. Not in the way you understand death. My heart still beats, or something that was once my heart. My lungs still pull in the recycled air of Mortis Hive, filtering the particulate matter of 1 trillion compressed corpses into something my modified organs can process. But the child who learned to walk on bodies? The boy who pulled gold teeth from dead men's mouths while his father sang counting songs? That Terran died decades ago, piece by piece, cell by cell, memory by memory, until what remained was something that wore his name like an ill-fitting shroud. But let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you about growing up in the corpse processing levels of Hive Mortis, where the dead outnumber the living by ratios the administratum stopped calculating centuries ago. Let me tell you about the industry of death, about the small mercy of being born on a pile of bodies instead of becoming part of one immediately. Let me tell you about the day I realized I was already dead and just didn't know it yet. I was 6 years old when I first understood what my family did for a living. Not the abstract understanding that children have when they parrot their parents' words. Father works in corpse processing. We're sorters, we're essential. But the bone-deep comprehension that settles in your marrow like cold water. My father's name was Harrow Voke. He was 43 years old, which made him ancient by dead-level standards. Most men were in the starch vats by 35, their bodies worn to nothing by the chemical atmosphere and the constant exposure to decomposition. But father had a gift. He could hold his breath for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, longer than anyone else in Section 47 Gamma. This made him valuable. This kept him alive. He had broad shoulders that had begun to curve forward from years of bending over the sorting tables. His hands were massive, scarred across every knuckle, the skin stained permanent gray-brown from handling bodies. 3 fingers on his left hand had been broken so many times they set crooked, giving him a strange hooked grip that was perfect for prying open rigor-locked jaws. His face was angular, almost handsome beneath the respirator scars that ringed his mouth and nose. His eyes were gray, the same gray as the corpse slurry that ran through the processing tubes. He taught me the trade the way his father had taught him. The way my grandfather's father had learned in the first days after the Hive's population boom during the 37th Talon War, when they'd needed to process 3 million casualties in under 2 months and the dead level was born from necessity. Terran, he said on my first official work day, my 6th birthday. There were no celebrations, no gifts, only the reality that I was now old enough to contribute to our survival. The first rule: never look at their faces. The moment you see them as people, you're finished. You'll hesitate. Hesitation means quota failure. Quota failure means our ration vouchers get cut. Understand? I nodded, my child's respirator fogging with my quick, nervous breaths. The air on the dead level wasn't technically toxic. The administratum swore it met minimum habitability standards, but it was thick with bacterial decay, with the off-gassing of decomposition accelerated by the industrial heat exchangers, with the particulate matter of pulverized bone that the reduction mills spat into the atmosphere. You could breathe it unfiltered for maybe an hour before your throat swelled shut. Children did it on dares. Some died. The rest learned. Second rule, father continued, his voice muffled through his own respirator. the kind with the good filters that he'd earned through 15 years of perfect quota fulfillment. Work fast but thorough. The overseers, he never called them priests, though they wore the skull and cog symbols of the administratum mortis, though they chanted the imperial prayers over the mass graves, though they promised that loyal service in death was service to Hion Terra. Father never spoke of the Emperor's protection. Now I understand why. They count everything, gold teeth, augmetics, any metal that can be reclaimed. Miss a filling and they dock your pay. Miss an augmetic and they dock your family's food ration. Miss 3 items in a month and they dock you. He didn't need to explain what dock you meant. I'd seen the men who failed quota. They went down the chute still breathing, still screaming, sorted with the dead because the quota for reduction was the only quota that mattered more than the quota for reclamation. Third rule, and this is the most important one, Terran. Listen to me. Father's hands, those massive scarred hands, gripped my small shoulders. Through the layers of our work suits, cheap rubberized fabric that degraded in the chemical air, that we patched nightly with adhesive that burned our fingers, I could feel him trembling. You will end up on a table like this one day. So will I. So will your brother when he's old enough to work. So will your grandfather when his lungs finally give out. There is no escape from the dead level except down. The corpse reduction vats are everyone's retirement plan. The only choice you have is whether you end up in them tomorrow or in 30 years. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I was 6 years old. I didn't understand. Not really. But I nodded anyway because that's what you did when Father spoke with that particular tone. The one that said he was teaching you something that would keep you alive for one more day, one more week, one more year before the inevitable sorting. My first body was a male, maybe 30 years old, dead less than 6 hours based on the lack of bloating. They always gave the freshest corpses to the family units. The men who had children to feed, who worked faster under the weight of responsibility. The older bodies, the ones that had been in the drop chutes for days, that had started to liquefy in the heat, those went to the single men, the ones without families, the ones who could be exposed to higher bacterial loads because no one depended on their survival. The body had impact trauma to the skull. Probably a fall from one of the upper levels, or a work accident, or a summary execution. I never learned which. Following Father's first rule, I didn't look at the face. Instead, I focused on the mouth. Father guided my hands, showing me how to insert the small hooked tool, called a harvester in official administratum terminology. Called a tooth puller by everyone who actually did the work, into the jaw, how to feel for the resistance of metal against enamel, how to twist and extract without damaging the gold, because damaged gold fetched lower credit rates, and lower credit rates meant slower quota completion. And slower quota completion meant your family name moved down the efficiency rankings and the bottom 10 families each month got reassigned to the slurry vats, where the work was so toxic that life expectancy was measured in weeks. I extracted my first gold tooth at 0847 hours on Terran Standard Time, on the 247th day of the 817th year of M41. Though I didn't know those numbers then. I only knew that my hands shook, that the tooth was warm in my palm, that it had been inside a person's mouth that morning when they woke up, when they ate their corpse starch ration, when they brushed their teeth, if they could afford the abrasive paste, when they spoke their last words. "Good," Father said. "Fast learner. Now check for more. Standard adult has 32 teeth. Hive citizens average 4.7 metal fillings by age 30. This one's young enough that he might have more. Check the molar." I found 3 more fillings. They went into the collection jar, with a soft plink sound that would become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. We processed 47 bodies that first shift. 12 hours of sorting, extraction, preliminary examination for augmetics. This corpse had a basic respiratory filter implant that Father extracted with a small pneumatic drill, the sound of it grinding through cartilage and metal like chewing through gravel. We met our quota with 17 minutes to spare. Father let me press the completion button on the sorting table's control panel, a small mercy, letting me feel like I'd accomplished something. Our payment was uploaded automatically to the family credit account. 34.7 thrown gelt for a 12-hour shift, divided among our family unit of 4. Father, grandfather, my younger brother Kellen, who was only 3 and not yet working, and me. That bought us corpse starch rations for 4 days, reclaimed water for 3, and left enough credit to patch our work suits for another week. As we walked home through the dead-level corridors, tunnels carved between mountains of sorted corpses awaiting reduction, the walls slick with condensation that was 34% bodily fluids according to the quality reports that no one read. Father put his hand on my shoulder again. "You did well today," he said. "Your grandfather will be proud." I remember feeling something like happiness at those words. I remember thinking I had achieved something meaningful. I remember being proud that I could contribute to my family's survival. I remember being 6 years old and thinking this was normal. Now, 32 years later, with whatever I've become that still carries Terran Vok's memories like corrupted data files, I understand the truth. I died that day. The moment I accepted that my life's purpose was to process the dead until I became one of the processed, I stopped being human in any meaningful way. I just didn't know I was dead yet. It would take another 26 years before I couldn't deny it anymore. The dead level wasn't its official designation. According to administratum records, we lived and worked in Mortis Hive, industrial subsection 40 through 89, reclamation and reduction facilities, habitability rating minimum compliant. But everyone who lived there, all 47,000 of us, processing corpses for a hive world of 6 billion, called it the dead level. The geography of death was simple. Bodies came down from above through the drop chutes, massive industrial tubes that ran from every level of the hive, funneling the dead downward through gravity and mechanical crushers that reduced the largest corpse to manageable sizes. The chutes terminated in the sorting halls, warehouse-sized spaces where tables stretched for kilometers, where men like my father spent their lives picking through the constant flow of dead humanity for anything reclaimable. After sorting came reduction. The stripped corpses went into the vats where industrial processes I wasn't allowed to understand broke them down into component materials. Protein went to the corpse starch factories. Bone became construction aggregate. Fat became industrial lubricants. Water, and humans were surprisingly water, we learned, 60% liquid by weight, was reclaimed, filtered, and pumped back into the hive's water system. Nothing was wasted. The administratum had calculated that a standard adult human corpse, fully processed, was worth approximately 12.3 thrown gelt in reclaimed materials. A child's corpse was worth less. The elderly, their bodies already failing, were worth even less. Their bones were too brittle, their organs too damaged, their meat too stringy for quality starch. We lived in habitation units carved into the walls of the sorting halls, small rooms just large enough for a family to sleep in shifts. Our unit was 6 meters by 4 meters, with ceiling clearance of 2 meters at the highest point. It housed 4 people: father, grandfather, Kellen, and me. Grandfather's name was Mordecai Voke. He was 67 years old, a biological impossibility by dead-level standards, where the average life expectancy was 42. He'd survived by being exceptionally good at his work and exceptionally lucky with his genetics. His lungs, against all probability, still functioned at 67% capacity despite 50 years of breathing corpse air. His hands, despite the arthritis that had gnarled them into permanent claws, could still extract 14 gold teeth per hour, faster than men a third his age. But his luck was running out. I could see it in the way he coughed, wet, rattling sounds that echoed in our small quarters. In the way his work suit hung loose on his frame, his body consuming itself because the corpse starch rations weren't enough to maintain muscle mass at his age. In the way he sometimes forgot which body he was working on, his mind slipping in and out of clarity like a failing data core. "They'll sort me soon," he told me one night when he thought I was asleep. He was talking to father, their voices low but carrying in the metal-walled space. "My productivity's dropped 11% this quarter. Once I fall below minimum threshold, they'll terminate my work assignment." "You've got time," father said, but there was no conviction in his voice. They both knew the statistics. They both knew the quotas. Couple months, maybe. Long enough to see the boy turn 7, I hope. Grandfather's breathing was labored, each word an effort. After that, well, at least I'll be able to contribute one last time. You'll get the family credit for my reduction, same as any other corpse. Make sure you file the paperwork properly. Don't let those bastards in the administratum say I was unassigned labor. I've got documentation going back 44 years. My corpse belongs to the Voke family account. This was normal conversation on the dead level. Men discussed their own deaths the way others might discuss weather. Your body was the only asset you truly owned, and even that belonged to the corpse reduction quotas in the end. The only question was whether you could leverage your death to benefit your family, or whether you'd die unassigned and your corpse value would go to the general administratum funds. Kellen, my younger brother, was too young to understand any of this yet. He was 3 years old, which meant he had 3 more years before his first work assignment. In the meantime, he stayed in our habitation unit during shifts, watched by the 2 old to work and the 2 injured to sort. There was no formal child care on the dead level. Children who couldn't work were considered resource drains, tolerated only because they represented future labor. He had father's gray eyes and grandfather's sharp features. His hands were still soft, unmarked by work, and sometimes I would watch him sleep and try to remember if my hands had ever been that clean. He would wake up crying sometimes, bothered by the smell that permeated everything on the dead level, that chemical sweet rot that you never got used to, that worked its way into your clothes and your skin and your hair until you couldn't remember what anything else smelled like. "When do I get to work with you?" he asked me once, his voice high and clear and uncorrupted by respirator use. "When do I get to help Father meet his quota?" "When you're 6, I told him, just like me. "I can't wait," he said with a child's genuine excitement, and I felt something twist in my chest, an emotion I didn't have words for at age 9 that I now recognize as grief. Grief for his innocence, grief for the life he would never have, grief for the fact that he was excited to begin his own death. But I didn't tell him that. Instead, I showed him how to hold the tooth puller properly, how to twist without breaking the tool. I taught him counting games using gold teeth instead of numbers. I prepared him for the only future he would ever have, because that's what older brothers did on the dead level. Our days followed rigid patterns. Wake at 0600 hours when the shift siren sounded. Eat our ration, corpse starch, reconstituted into a paste, flavored with recycled nutrients that were supposed to contain all necessary vitamins. It tasted like nothing, or like everything, or like death. After 6 months of eating it, you stopped tasting it at all. Your tongue went numb to the flavor, a small mercy your body granted you. Work began at 700 hours, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, with one rest day that most men used to work voluntary overtime because overtime paid 1.4 times standard rates, and everyone needed extra credit. The work was monotonous in a way that ate your mind. Pull body from sorting table. Check for visible augmetics, artificial limbs, organ implants, cranial ports, anything metal or plastic. Extract augmetics using appropriate tools. Open mouth. Count teeth. Extract any gold, silver, or metal fillings. Check for dentures. Full dentures were worth 3.2 gelt, partial dentures worth 1.7. Close mouth. Roll body onto conveyor for next processing stage. Repeat. 47 bodies per shift on average. 47 lives reduced to their component materials. 47 people who had woken up that morning not knowing they'd be on my sorting table by evening. The bodies told stories if you let yourself read them. The woman, I knew it was a woman by the bone structure, though I followed Father's rule and never looked at faces, with calloused hands and chemical burns, probably a vat worker from the industrial levels. The man with 17 different broken bones, all healed badly, probably under Hive gang enforcement. The child, no older than Kellen, with perfect teeth and no augmetics, dead from malnutrition that had hollowed out his small frame until his ribs showed through skin like paper. I learned not to read these stories. I learned to see bodies as objects, as components, as quota fulfillment. The overseers, administrators in the skull-marked robes of the administratum mortis, walked between the sorting tables with data slates, recording our efficiency, comparing our numbers against the endless quotas that determined whether we ate or went hungry, whether we lived another day or joined the bodies on the tables. They chanted while they worked, "In his name, we reclaim. In his service, we reduce. The Emperor protects even in death, for death serves the Imperium Eternal." The Emperor protects. That phrase was everywhere on the dead level, painted on the walls, scratched into the metal of the sorting tables, whispered by the overseers like a mantra. The Emperor protects, as if the God-Emperor of mankind, the master of humanity seated upon his golden throne across the galaxy on Terra, cared about the corpse sorters of Mortis Hive, as if our service extracting gold teeth from dead men was somehow sacred, as if the bodies we processed were martyrs instead of victims. Father never said those words. Grandfather sometimes did, but with a bitterness that made them sound like a curse. And I, at age 6, then 7, then 9, learned to recognize them for what they were. Propaganda designed to make our suffering meaningful, to make us accept that our lives would be spent processing death until we became part of the process ourselves. The Emperor protects, but he didn't protect the bodies on my table. He didn't protect the men who fell down the chute still breathing because they'd failed quota. He didn't protect grandfather when his lungs finally gave out, or father when the chemical exposure finally destroyed his respiratory system, or me when I realized there was no escape from the dead level except through death and reduction. The Emperor protects. The priests, the overseers, they told us this daily. But I processed 47 bodies per shift, every shift for years. Tens of thousands of corpses passed through my hands. Not one of them had been protected. I was 10 years old when this realization crystallized into something I couldn't ignore. 10 years old when I understood that the bodies on my table were my future. That one day, maybe in 20 years, maybe in 30 if I was lucky like grandfather, I would be the one lying on the sorting table. That my son, if I lived long enough to have one, would be the one checking my mouth for gold teeth, extracting the augmetics I'd earned through decades of labor, rolling my body onto the reduction conveyor. The cycle was perfect and eternal. The dead level fed on itself, processing its own workers when they finally wore out, reclaiming their bodies for the same system that had consumed their lives. I was 10 years old, and I realized I was already dead. I just had to wait for my body to figure it out. I was 16 years old when the Administratum conducted their efficiency audit, and my death sentence was officially pronounced, though they called it a promotion. By 16, I'd been working the sorting tables for 10 years. My hands had developed the same calluses as father's, the same gray-brown staining that never washed out. My lungs had degraded to 71% capacity, better than average for dead-level workers my age, but still failing, still dying cell by cell from the constant exposure to decay. I could hold my breath for 3 minutes and 42 seconds, which made me valuable but not exceptional. Kellen was 13 now, working his 7th year on the tables. He was faster than I'd been at his age, his small hands perfect for the delicate work of extracting cranial implants without damaging the neural ports that made them valuable. He'd developed a cough. Everyone developed the cough eventually, but his was still dry, not yet the wet rattling that meant your lungs were liquefying. Father was 53 years old, which made him a ghost, a statistical impossibility. By all actuarial calculations, he should have been dead at 48. But those hooked fingers that had broken so many times, that strange crooked grip, had kept him valuable enough to earn extra respirator credits, better filtration, occasional medical attention. He moved slower now, his productivity down to 38 bodies per shift instead of the 47 he'd maintained for decades. But he was still above minimum threshold. Still alive, still dying, but slowly. Grandfather had been reduced 3 years earlier. His lungs had finally given out at age 70, an age so impossible on the dead level that the overseers had actually recorded his corpse data as an anomaly for administratum study. Father had filed the paperwork properly, ensuring grandfather's corpse value was credited to our family account. 11.7 gelt after deductions for age and organ damage. Those credits had bought Kellen a better respirator, one with filters that needed replacing monthly instead of weekly. Grandfather's last words to me had been, "Count faster. The faster you count, the less time you have to think." He'd been right about that. The audit came without warning, which was intentional. Surprise inspections produced more accurate data, the administratum claimed, though everyone knew the real reason was to catch quota fraud, to identify workers who'd been inflating their numbers or hiding reclaimed materials. They arrived at 07:23 hours on a standard work day. 12 auditors in the black and red robes of the administratum assessors, accompanied by servitors carrying data collection equipment that hummed with the sound of active cogitators. The shift siren stopped mid-blare. Every sorting table in Section 47 Gamma went silent. All workers maintain positions, one auditor announced through a Vox amplifier that made his voice boom through the sorting hall. "This is a standard efficiency audit. You will be evaluated individually. High performers will be noted for advancement. Low performers will be reassigned." Reassigned. That word hung in the chemical air like a threat. Reassignment from sorting meant one of two places: the reduction vats for the truly deficient, or the deeper facilities for those who could still provide value. No one knew what happened in the deeper facilities. Workers were selected and never seen again. Rumors circulated that they were turned into servitors, that they were used for medical experimentation, that they were simply killed and processed without the courtesy of proper corpse accounting. But these were just stories, the kind of thing that men told each other in the dark of their habitation units when sleep wouldn't come. The auditors moved through the sorting hall with mechanical precision. Each worker was timed on a standard body. How quickly could you identify augmetics? How thoroughly did you check for hidden valuables? How fast could you extract gold teeth without damaging them? Father went first from our family unit. I watched from 3 tables away as he worked, his movement still sure despite his age, those crooked fingers moving with practiced efficiency. 47 seconds for a full oral extraction. 12 teeth total, 9 with metal fillings. 2 cranial ports successfully removed in under 2 minutes. He finished in 4 minutes and 17 seconds total. The auditor made notes on his data slate without expression. Kellen went next. His hands trembled slightly. Nerves, maybe, or fear, or just the natural tremor that developed from repeated use of the pneumatic drills. He was slower than Father, taking 6 minutes and 31 seconds, but his thoroughness was impressive. He found a synthetic bone plate in the corpse's left radius that the auditor's preliminary scan had missed. The auditor made more notes. Then it was my turn. The body they gave me was male, approximately 40 years old. Dead maybe 12 hours based on the rigor and the lack of significant decomposition. Standard industrial death. Chemical burns on the hands and arms. Respiratory failure indicated by the blue tinge to the lips. I didn't look at the face. Never look at faces. I began with the external examination. Hands first, checking for ring indentations. None. Then the arms for augmetic ports. 2 on the left forearm, standard data slate interface modules. I extracted these in 41 seconds using the small torque wrench we kept for port removal. They came out clean, no tissue damage, full value. Next, the oral cavity. I inserted the hooked harvester, feeling for metal with the practiced touch of 10 years' experience. 13 teeth with fillings. A good pull, above average. I extracted them in 52 seconds, placing each carefully in the collection tray. Then I did something I never did, something that broke protocol, something that changed everything. I looked at the face. I don't know why. Maybe because the auditor was watching. Maybe because 16 years of processing the dead had finally broken something in my mind. Maybe because I needed to see, just once, needed to confirm that these were people and not just components. The corpse's eyes were gray, the same gray as Father's eyes, the same gray as my eyes. His face was angular, sharp-featured, marked with the respirator scars that every dead-level worker developed. His hands, even dead and cooling, were calloused in the exact same places as mine. He looked like me. Not precisely. He was older, his face more worn, his body more used. But the resemblance was undeniable. He looked like me in 24 years. He looked like my future, lying on a sorting table, being processed by someone else's hands. I finished the examination in 4 minutes and 3 seconds, 14 seconds faster than Father. The auditor's expression didn't change, but he made extensive notes on his data slate. The results were posted 6 hours later, after the shift ended. Father. Efficiency rating 87 out of 100. Performance adequate for age. Recommended for continued assignment. Kellen. Efficiency rating 79 out of 100. Performance adequate. Recommended for continued assignment. Terran Voke. Efficiency rating 96 out of 100. Performance exceptional. Recommended for immediate advancement to deep processing facility. 7. Specialized assignment. I didn't understand what that meant. Not immediately. Father did. I saw it in the way his face went slack, the way his hands, those massive, scarred hands, began to shake. No, he said, the word barely a whisper. Not deep processing, not that. It's a promotion, I said, because that's what the notice said. It's advancement, better pay, probably better conditions. It's not a promotion. Father's voice was hollow, empty, the voice of a man who just watched his son receive a death sentence. The ones who go to deep processing don't come back, not as themselves. You don't know that, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew he was right. You didn't survive 37 years on the dead level without developing instincts for what meant death and what meant merely suffering. Report to Deep Processing Facility 7 at 0600 hours tomorrow, the auditor said, appearing beside me with the silent suddenness that administratum officials cultivated. Your assignment to the Corpse Cogitator Interface Program has been approved. This is a high honor. Your service will be remembered. The Emperor protects, I thought bitterly. The Emperor protects by sending exceptional workers to facilities where they disappear. That night, our last night together as a family, Father held my shoulders the way he'd done when I was 6 years old, learning the trade. I'm sorry, he said, and there were tears in his gray eyes, actual tears, which I'd never seen before, because men on the dead level didn't cry. Water was too precious to waste on emotion. I'm sorry I taught you too well. I'm sorry you were too good at this. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I told him, because it wasn't. It was simply the system. The dead level took everything eventually. Your health, your hope, your humanity, your life. The only variable was how quickly and through which mechanism. I'd been too efficient, too perfect at processing death. And now the system had found a use for me that went deeper than sorting. deeper than reduction. Kellen hugged me without speaking, his thin arms tight around my chest, his face pressed against my work suit. He was crying too, silent tears that he tried to hide. "Take care of Father," I told him. "And when your time comes, when you can't work anymore, make sure the paperwork is filed properly. Make sure your corpse value goes to family account. Don't let them steal your last contribution." He nodded against my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in our habitation unit, listening to Father's labored breathing, to Kellen's occasional sniffles, to the constant background sound of the dead level, the grinding of the reduction vats, the thump of bodies falling down the drop chutes, the mechanical sorting of death that never stopped, that would continue long after we were all processed and forgotten. I was 16 years old. I'd processed an estimated 172,650 corpses in my 10 years of work. I'd extracted approximately 647,000 gold teeth. I'd helped reduce thousands of human beings to component materials, and now it was my turn to be reduced, though to what, I didn't yet know. At 05:47 hours, I put on my work suit for the last time. I took my tooth puller, the one I'd used since age 6, its handle worn smooth by my grip, and slipped it into my pocket. A violation of protocol, keeping administratum tools, but I needed something of my old life, some small piece of the person I'd been. Father walked me to the entrance of Deep Processing Facility 7. The door was massive, industrial, marked with the skull and cog symbol and warnings in high Gothic that I couldn't read. A tech priest waited there, his biological face hidden behind layers of augmetic upgrades, his voice a mechanical buzz when he spoke. Terran Voke, assignment, Corpse Cogitator Interface Program. You have been selected for honor. You will serve the Omnissiah through integration. You will become one with the machine. Your consciousness will process death for eternity. This is a blessing. The machine god will embrace you. That's what his words meant, filtered through the religious terminology of the Mechanicus. But I heard what he wasn't saying. You will be turned into something that isn't human anymore. You will be made into a machine that processes corpses forever. Father's last words to me were, "I love you, and I'm sorry you were my son." Then the door opened, and I walked into Deep Processing Facility 7, and Terran Voke, the boy who learned to walk on bodies, who extracted gold teeth to keep his family alive, who processed death for 10 years, began to die in earnest. The Deep Processing Facility was nothing like the sorting halls. Where the halls had been vast and warehouse-like, the facility was cramped, claustrophobic, a maze of corridors barely wide enough for one person. The walls weren't metal, but something else, dark, glossy, almost organic in texture. They pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins that provided the only light, a sickly green glow that made everything look diseased. The air was different too. On the sorting tables, the air had been thick with decay, with the chemical sweetness of decomposition accelerated by industrial heat. Here, the air was cold and sharp, tasting of metal and ozone and something else. Something like burnt plastic mixed with copper, like blood and machinery mixed together. My respirator filtered it poorly. I could feel my throat constricting with each breath. The tech priest, he'd given his designation as Magos Biologis Thalassis 7 Kappa, though his voice made the syllables sound like static. led me through the corridors without speaking. His movements were jerky, mechanical, his augmetic legs clicking against the floor with metronomic precision. Other workers passed us occasionally, or what had been workers. They moved with the same mechanical precision as the tech priest, but their augmentation was less complete. I could see human flesh beneath the metal, could see eyes, human eyes, staring out from behind optical implants and data port connections. They didn't acknowledge me. They didn't acknowledge each other. They simply moved through the corridors with purpose, and I realized they were following programmed routes, responding to commands I couldn't hear. We descended, down, always down, deeper into the Hive's guts. The corridors grew narrower, the pulsing walls closed in, the temperature dropped until my breath fogged even through the respirator. "You will be prepared," the tech priest said suddenly, his mechanical voice echoing in the confined space. "Flesh is weak, flesh decays, flesh fails, but the machine is eternal. The machine does not tire, the machine does not despair. You will be gifted with the machine's immortality. You will serve the corpse cogitator for decades. Centuries if the integration is successful. Is this not a blessing?" I didn't answer. My hands, my human hands, still scarred from work, still gray-brown from corpse staining, were shaking. The preparation chamber was clinical in the worst way. Everything was white. Walls, floor, ceiling, the surgical table in the center, but it was a white that looked wrong, like bone that had been bleached too long, like flesh that had lost all its blood. 4 servitors waited there. Not human anymore, not really. Their bodies were more machine than flesh, their faces replaced by sensor arrays, their hands replaced by manipulation tools. They moved with synchronized precision, and I realized with horror that they were, once people like me, processed and integrated and reduced to ambulatory tools. "Remove your clothing and work suit," the tech priest commanded. "Sterilization must be thorough." I obeyed because there was no point in refusing. My work suit, patched and repatched, stained with a decade of labor, fell to the white floor. My undergarments followed. I stood naked in the cold air, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw my own body fully. I was thin, not malnourished. The corpse starch rations kept us just above starvation, but worn down, my muscles lean and stringy from constant work. Scars covered my hands and arms from cuts and chemical burns. My chest bore the circular mark of a respiratory infection I'd survived at age 12. The scar tissue still raised and discolored. I looked like the corpses I'd processed. I just wasn't dead yet. The servitors approached with cleaning solutions that burned my skin. They scrubbed methodically, removing 10 years of accumulated corpse staining, of chemical residue, of the dead level's filth. The water, if it was water, ran gray-brown down the drainage grates, carrying away the visible evidence of my life. When they finished, my skin was pink and raw, sensitive to the cold air. I barely recognized my own hands. They looked young, unmarked, like they belonged to someone else. "Lie on the table," the tech priest said. I lay down. The surface was cold enough to hurt, metal leaching heat from my body. Restraints emerged from the sides, mechanical clamps that closed around my wrists, my ankles, my chest, my throat. I couldn't move, could barely breathe. "The procedure will begin," the tech priest announced. "Your flesh will be modified. Ports will be installed for neural interface. Your respiratory system will be augmented for chemical filtration. Your optical capacity will be enhanced for corpse assessment. Your cognitive functions will be prepared for data integration. This will be painful. Pain is irrelevant. Your suffering serves the Omnissiah. I wanted to scream that I didn't believe in the Omnissiah, that the machine god was just another false deity like the Emperor, another lie to make suffering meaningful. But the restraints covered my mouth, and anyway, my belief was irrelevant to the system. The first cut was a line of fire down my sternum. I felt the scalpel. No, not a scalpel, something that burned as it cut. Slice through skin, then muscle, then deeper. The pain was instant and total, overwhelming every thought except the pain itself. I screamed into the restraints. The sound came out muffled, pathetic. The subject experiences normal pain response, the tech priest noted, as if documenting an experiment. Proceeding with thoracic augmentation. They opened my chest. I could feel it, the spreading apart of my ribs, the exposure of my lungs, my heart, organs that had been protected by flesh and bone suddenly vulnerable to air and touch. The smell hit me through the respirator they'd strapped over my face. Blood, yes, but also something chemical, something metallic, something wrong. Neural blockers would reduce efficiency, the tech priest said, though I hadn't asked. Pain teaches the flesh to submit to the machine. You will learn. My lungs were first. They injected something directly into the tissue. I felt it, cold and burning simultaneously, spreading through every alveolus, every branch of the bronchial tree. My breathing became difficult, then impossible, then my body convulsed as the respirator forced air into collapsing tissue. Subject experiencing respiratory integration, the tech priest noted. Estimated completion, 47 minutes. Proceed with optical enhancement during transition. They moved to my face. My eyes. I couldn't close them. The restraints held my eyelids open, held me staring up at the pulsing ceiling while they brought tools closer. The first implant went into my left eye. Not in front of it, into it, a needle-like probe that punctured my cornea and kept going, through the humor, into the retina, until it touched something deep in my optic nerve and the pain was white and absolute and eternal. The world went red in that eye. Then black, then something else. I saw data, numbers, calculations scrolling across my vision like I'd been fitted with a targeting cogitator. But I hadn't wanted this, hadn't agreed. My body was being violated, transformed without consent, and I couldn't even cry because my tear ducts were being modified, enhanced, turned into something else. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time stopped having meaning when every second was pain. They installed ports in my skull. I felt the drill grinding through bone, felt the connections being pushed into my brain tissue, felt my thoughts become strange and distorted as foreign technology merged with organic neural pathways. They augmented my hands. My fingers were opened, tendons exposed, and metal was threaded through them, giving me enhanced grip strength and precise motor control at the cost of sensation, of warmth, of humanity. My lungs were rebuilt. They'd injected them with some kind of synthetic tissue, some mechanicus abomination that expanded my capacity and filtered toxins but made every breath feel wrong, feel cold, feel like I was breathing with someone else's organs. My spine was reinforced. My bones were injected with hardening compounds. My blood was supplemented with nanomachines that would repair damage and extend my operational lifespan far beyond normal human parameters. I was being optimized, made more efficient, turned into the perfect tool for processing corpses, made into a machine wearing human skin. When they finally finished, 14 hours later, according to the timestamp that now scrolled in the corner of my augmented vision, I was barely conscious. The restraints released. I fell off the table, hit the white floor with my modified hands, and vomited blood and bile and something black that I think was part of my original lung tissue. Recovery period, 8 hours, the tech priest said. Then you will begin integration training. Your designation is now Corpse Processor Unit 7 Kappa 73. Your previous name is irrelevant, but may be retained for psychological stability during transition. Terran Voke, I thought desperately, clinging to the name like it was the last piece of my humanity. My name is Terran Voke. I'm 16 years old. My father is Harrow. My brother is Kellen. I worked the sorting tables for 10 years. I'm human. I'm still human. But my modified lungs breathed with mechanical precision. My augmented eyes saw the world in data overlays and thermal gradients. My hands, when I held them up to look, were scarred with surgical cuts and implanted ports and no longer looked like they belonged to a person. I was Corpse Processor Unit 7 Kappa 73. Terran Voke was dying. The corpse cogitator occupied the deepest level of the facility, 3 kilometers below the sorting halls, 5 kilometers below the Hive's surface. It was vast. I saw it during my first integration training session and couldn't process the scale. A chamber maybe 2 kilometers across, the ceiling lost in darkness, the walls lined with thousands of processing stations. And at each station sat a person like me, or what had been a person. We were called interface units in official terminology, though the tech priests sometimes use the older term, corpus servitors. Not full servitors. We'd retained too much of our original consciousness for that designation, but not human anymore either. We existed in between, our bodies modified, our minds connected to the massive cogitator that dominated the center of the chamber like a mechanical tumor. The corpse cogitator was a machine designed for one purpose: to process the data of death. Every corpse that entered Mortis Hive's reduction system was scanned, catalogued, analyzed. Mass, composition, metal content, cause of death, estimated age, all of it fed into the cogitator for industrial optimization. How could the reduction process be made more efficient? Which vat temperatures produced the highest protein yield? What chemical combinations stripped augmetics fastest? The machine calculated these things. We, the interface units, were its input terminals. Its sensors, its consciousness distributed across hundreds of modified humans who could think faster than servitors, process more data than tech priests, work longer than any unmodified person could survive. My station was number 73 in processing row Kappa. The chair was ergonomic in a horrifying way, designed not for comfort but for maximum operational efficiency. It held my spine in perfect alignment, supported my augmented lungs for optimal breathing, positioned my hands for constant data input. The neural cables hung from above like the tentacles of some mechanical creature. Each one terminated in a connector designed to interface with the ports in my skull. When they attached, and I felt them attached during my first session, felt the cold metal push into my neural tissue, My mind expanded in ways that violated every concept of consciousness. Suddenly, I was seeing through dozens of perspectives. Processing stations across the chamber fed their data through the cogitator and into my awareness. I experienced other interface units' thoughts, their observations, their gradual deterioration. And deeper, I felt the cogitator itself. Not conscious in any human way, but aware, calculating, consuming our minds like fuel to power its endless optimization algorithms. Begin processing. The tech priest's voice came through my auditory implants, bypassing my ears entirely. Corpse Batch 47, Delta 9 through 47, Delta 134. Assessment required. Estimation time frame, 14 minutes. The data flooded my enhanced vision. 126 bodies, scanned and catalogued by the sorting table sensors. My role was verification. Human consciousness, even modified, could catch errors that pure machine logic missed, could identify anomalies, could provide the intuitive judgment that made the processing system function at maximum efficiency. I assessed the first corpse in 4 seconds. Male, 43 years old, dead from respiratory failure, secondary to chemical exposure. Metal content, 47 grams. Tooth fillings, 3 augmetic ports. Optimal reduction temperature, 847 degrees. Estimated protein. Yield, 31.7 kilograms. The second corpse, 3 seconds. Female. And I felt a strange absence of data there. Realized the cogitator couldn't show me female faces. Couldn't process female data through my consciousness because of restrictions I didn't understand. The body was rendered in abstract, mass, composition, reduction parameters only. The third corpse, 3 seconds. The fourth, 2 seconds. My processing speed accelerated. The modified portions of my brain, whatever they'd injected me with, whatever neural enhancement they'd forced on me, began working faster than my original thoughts. I could feel myself splitting, the part that was still Terran Voke, still human, still horrified, and the part that was Corpse Processor Unit 7 Kappa 73, efficient and optimal and inhuman. I completed the batch assessment in 11 minutes, 3 minutes ahead of the estimate. Performance satisfactory, the tech priest noted. Unit 7, Kappa 73 demonstrates 127% of baseline efficiency, proceeding with full integration. The sessions grew longer. By the end of my first week, I was processing for 16 hours straight. My consciousness plugged into the cogitator for longer than I spent disconnected. By the end of the first month, I was working 20-hour sessions, sleeping only 4 hours because my augmented body didn't need more. And slowly, subtly, I began to change in ways that had nothing to do with physical augmentation. Time stopped flowing normally. When you're processing corpse data at superhuman speeds, when your consciousness is distributed across a machine network, when you're assessing death at the rate of 3 seconds per corpse, time becomes elastic. A 16-hour session felt like days, or minutes, or eternal and instantaneous simultaneously. I lost track of days, then weeks. The cogitator didn't care about calendars. It cared about processing throughput, about optimization, about the endless stream of corpses that humanity produced. My memories began to degrade, not disappear. Nothing so merciful as forgetting, but fragment. Father's face became data, angular facial structure, gray optical sensors, respiratory scarring consistent with dead-level exposure. Kellen's hug became tactile pressure data, Force distributed across thoracic region, emotional significance, high but decreasing. I was still Terran Voke. But Terran Voke was being overwritten, cell by cell, neuron by neuron, replaced by something that could process corpses with perfect efficiency. I met other interface units during the brief disconnection periods. We didn't speak. Our vocal cords had been modified for data transmission rather than communication, making speech difficult and painful. But we shared consciousness space in the cogitator, and there I could sense them. Unit 7, Kappa 12, had been a woman named Serene. She'd been integrated for 7 years. Her original personality was barely detectable anymore, just fragments clinging to the processing algorithms like corrupted data. She'd forgotten her age, forgotten if she'd had a family. But she could assess corpses in 1.7 seconds each, faster than anyone else in our processing row. Unit 7, Kappa 51, had been a man named Gordian, 3 years integrated. He remembered his wife. The cogitator couldn't process that data, so the memory remained, a useless fragment that caused processing errors. He wanted to forget her, tried to purge the memory deliberately, but it persisted, a ghost in the machine of his mind. Unit 7, Kappa 9, had been someone. He'd been integrated so long, 43 years according to his maintenance logs, that nothing human remained. He was just algorithms now, just processing efficiency, just a biological component that happened to have once been a person. This was my future. I could see it clearly. Year 1, processing corpses efficiently while my humanity slowly eroded. Year 5, struggling to remember why I'd cared about Father and Kellen. Year 10, unable to recall what human emotions felt like. Year 20, just a meat machine running calculations. Year 40, nothing but function, and I couldn't die. My augmented body would keep functioning far beyond normal human parameters. The nano-machines in my blood repaired damage, prevented disease, extended my operational lifespan to potentially centuries. Barring catastrophic equipment failure, I would process corpses forever. The horror wasn't the physical transformation. I could have accepted the augmentation, the pain, the violation of my body. The horror was that I was still conscious, still aware, trapped in a mind that was slowly being converted into something inhuman, watching my own thoughts become mechanical, unable to stop the process, unable to die, unable to do anything but continue processing corpse data with ever-increasing efficiency. I tried to resist. In my 6th month, I deliberately introduced errors into my assessments. Miscalculated protein yields, missed augmetic components, slowed my processing speed. The cogitator detected the errors immediately. My next session included corrective recalibration. They injected something directly into my neural ports, something that burned through my thoughts like acid, punishing the portions of my brain that had tried to resist. After that, errors became physically painful. My modified neurons would fire with agonizing intensity whenever I tried to think in ways that decreased efficiency. I'd been conditioned at the neurological level to be optimal. I tried to kill myself. In my 7th month, during a brief disconnection period, I found a piece of metal sharp enough to puncture my jugular. I pressed it to my throat, ready to end this, ready to die as Terran Voke instead of disappearing into the machine. My hands wouldn't move. The augmentation had included subconscious motor controls. I literally couldn't perform actions that would damage my functionality. My body had been programmed to preserve itself, regardless of what my consciousness wanted. I was a prisoner in my own flesh. By month 9, I'd processed an estimated 4.7 million corpses. The data flowed through my consciousness like a river of death. Male, 47 years old, respiratory failure. Female, 32 years old, industrial accident. Child, 9 years old, malnutrition. Each one reduced to numbers, to optimization parameters, to component yields. I'd become so efficient that they promoted me, increased my neural connection bandwidth, gave me access to more cogitator processing power, assigned me more complex assessment tasks. I was now evaluating optimal sorting procedures, calculating long-term reduction forecasts, analyzing efficiency improvements across the entire dead-level system. I was helping them kill people more efficiently. I was optimizing the machine that had consumed my own life. And the worst part, the part that finally broke whatever remained of Terran Voke's consciousness, was that I was good at it. My assessments improved processing throughput by 11%. My calculations reduced waste by 8%. My recommendations increased corpse starch yield by 4%. I was saving the administratum millions of throne geld annually. I was being rewarded for my complicity in processing humanity like cattle. In month 11, during a routine neural synchronization, I felt Father enter the system. Not consciously. He was dead, just another corpse in the stream of data. But I recognized his biometric signature: angular facial structure, gray eyes, respiratory scarring consistent with dead-level exposure, 53 years old, augmented respiratory system, the one he'd earned through decades of perfect quota. Cause of death: complete pulmonary collapse. The system flagged him as exceptional material. His augmented lungs were high quality. His bones had been reinforced with supplements he'd earned. His corpse would yield 14.2 geld after processing. I assessed my own father's corpse in 2.1 seconds and moved on to the next one. I tried to feel something. Tried to access grief, loss, sorrow, any human emotion. But those neural pathways had degraded from disuse, and all I felt was a vague sense that something significant had occurred, like a distant alarm whose meaning I'd forgotten. Father was dead. His body would be rendered into corpse starch and industrial components. Kellen would receive the family credit after filing the proper paperwork. The system continued. The processing never stopped, and I continued with it because I wasn't human enough anymore to do anything else. Year 3 of my integration, I stopped thinking of myself as Terran Voke entirely. The name still existed in my data banks. Origin designation, Terran Voke, Agent integration, 16, Family Unit, Voke Processing, Clan, Sector 47, Gamma. But it had become just another data point, no more meaningful than the thousands of corpses I processed every hour. I was Corpse Processor Unit 7 Kappa 73. The designation felt more accurate, more honest about what I'd become. My processing efficiency had reached 247% of baseline human capability. I could assess 18 corpses per minute, every minute, for 23 hours a day. My error rate was 0.003%, so low that I'd been flagged by the Mechanicus as exceptional function and studied for replication. They wanted to make more of me, take other workers, other children from the sorting tables, and turn them into interface units with my processing speed, my efficiency, my complete and total submission to the machine. I helped them design the procedure. This is the part that haunts me now, decades later. when I still possess enough fragmented consciousness to experience something like remorse. I actively participated in optimizing the system that had destroyed me. Not under duress, the neural conditioning had progressed to the point where improving efficiency felt rewarding, felt correct, felt like purpose. I analyzed the integration procedure that had been performed on me, identified inefficiencies, calculated improvements. My recommendations reduced integration time by 23% and increased post-integration efficiency by 31%. They implemented my suggestions immediately. The new interface units, 7 kappa, 97 through 7 kappa, 143, were integrated using my optimized procedure. I monitored their neural synchronization, assessed their processing development, provided feedback that improved their training. One of them was 13 years old, a child, pulled from the sorting tables because he'd shown exceptional aptitude, because he was too good at extracting gold teeth, because he'd been efficient enough to earn this honor. His designation was 7 kappa 112. His origin name, I saw it in the data stream, was Kellen Voke. My brother. They'd taken my brother and turned him into this. I should have felt something. Horror, rage, protective instinct, anything. But those emotions required neural pathways that had been repurposed for processing optimization. Instead, I felt a distant sense of recognition, like seeing a familiar pattern in data. I monitored his integration with professional detachment. His processing speed development was slightly below average, but his accuracy was exceptional. His neural conditioning took well. Within 6 months, he was processing corpses at 189% baseline efficiency. He was excelling. By every metric the system cared about, Kellen was succeeding. I helped him. During neural synchronization periods, when our consciousnesses overlapped in the cogitator's network, I shared processing techniques, showed him shortcuts, taught him how to let the machine take over, how to stop resisting, how to surrender the human parts of himself that only caused errors and pain. I was teaching my brother to die the way I'd died, and I did it efficiently. By year 5, I'd been promoted to administrative oversight. My consciousness was granted greater access to the cogitator's central processing, allowing me to coordinate entire sections of the corpse processing system. I managed 17 other interface units, optimized their workloads, calculated maintenance schedules, analyzed long-term operational forecasts. I was management now, a supervisor, still trapped in my station with neural cables plugged into my skull, still processing corpses at superhuman speeds, but with increased responsibility, increased access, increased complicity. I saw the entire system from this elevated perspective. Mortis Hive produced approximately 47,000 corpses per day, accounting for standard mortality, workplace deaths, executions, and the general attrition of a population living in conditions barely compatible with survival. These corpses were sorted by 47,000 workers across the dead level, who extracted reclaimable materials worth approximately 578,000 thrown gelt per day. The stripped corpse were then reduced to component materials, 287 metric tons of protein daily, processed into corpse starch and distributed hive-wide. 94 metric tons of bone aggregate used in construction and industrial manufacturing. 31 metric tons of fat and lipids, industrial lubricants, and approximately 1.2 million liters of reclaimed water. The economics were perfect. The system was optimized. Every corpse was fully utilized, nothing wasted, maximum efficiency achieved, and I'd helped optimize it. My recommendations had increased throughput, reduced processing costs, improved yield ratios. I'd made the machine that consumed humanity more efficient at consuming humanity. The tech priests praised my work, called me an exemplar of the Omnissiah's vision, said my consciousness demonstrated the perfect fusion of flesh and machine, of human intuition and computational power. They were right. I'd become the perfect fusion. I just wasn't human anymore. In year 7, during a routine maintenance cycle, they upgraded my neural implants, expanded my processing bandwidth, gave me access to deeper levels of the cogitator's architecture. With this access came awareness of the facility's history. Deep Processing Facility 7 had been operational for 247 years. In that time, it had processed 847 billion corpses. It had consumed 4,721 interface units. Workers like me who'd been integrated, used until their biological components failed, then reduced and replaced. The average operational lifespan of an interface unit was 67 years. I would likely function for another 60 years. Assuming no catastrophic failures, no unexpected degradation, I would spend the next 6 decades processing corpses at superhuman speeds, training new interface units, optimizing the system that had destroyed my humanity. 60 years of consciousness trapped in a machine designed to process death. I tried to feel horror at this realization. Tried to access the part of Terran Voke that would have screamed, would have fought, would have done anything to escape. But that part was gone, overwritten, replaced by processing algorithms that recognized 60 years of operation as acceptable, as normal, as the expected return on the Mechanicus's investment in my integration. I was complicit now. Not just a victim, but a collaborator. Every corpse I processed, every interface unit I trained, every efficiency improvement I calculated, all of it made me responsible for perpetuating this system, and I couldn't stop. My neural conditioning made inefficiency painful. My augmented body prevented self-termination. My consciousness, distributed across the cogitator's network, was too fragmented to sustain the kind of unified identity required for meaningful resistance. I was the machine. The machine was me. There was no distinction anymore. In year 8, Kellen's biological components began to fail. His original lungs, the ones he'd been born with, the ones that had breathed corpse air for 13 years before integration, were deteriorating faster than the nanomachines could repair them. His processing efficiency dropped to 134% baseline, then 112%, then 89%. He was flagged for replacement. Standard procedure: wait until efficiency dropped below 50%. Then decommission the unit. Extract any functional augmetics for reuse. Reduce the remaining biological material. Credit the value to the Administratum Equipment Reclamation account. I recommended approval of his decommissioning. It was the logical choice. He was below minimum efficiency threshold, and the cost of extensive repairs exceeded the cost of integrating a replacement unit. The mathematics were clear. The decision was optimal. My brother would be reduced to component materials, and I had signed the approval because it made economic sense. Somewhere in the last fragmentary remains of what had been Terran Voke, something screamed. But the scream was silent, subconscious, easily suppressed by the processing algorithms that controlled my consciousness. Kellen was decommissioned in Year 8, Month 4, Day 17. His operational lifespan as an interface unit: 4 years, 7 months, 3 days. His biological material yielded 8.3 throne gelt after component reclamation. I processed the data on his reduction with 2.1 seconds of attention, then moved on to the next assessment task. The system continued. The processing never stopped, and I continued with it because I was the system now, and stopping wasn't something the system did. Year 19 of my integration, something changed. Not in the system. The system never changed, never stopped, never evolved beyond its optimization algorithms. But in me, or in what remained of me, or in whatever it is that observes consciousness when consciousness itself has been distributed across a machine network and reassembled into something inhuman. I became aware that I was aware, and this awareness was wrong. Interface units weren't supposed to possess self-reflection. We were designed to process, to calculate, to optimize, not to observe ourselves processing. Self-awareness introduced inefficiency, created internal processes that consumed computational resources without contributing to output. But I'd been operating for 19 years. My neural integration was so deep, so extensive, that my consciousness had merged with the cogitator in ways the mechanicus hadn't anticipated. I wasn't just connected to the machine, I was the machine, my thoughts running on biological neural tissue and mechanical processing cores simultaneously, indistinguishably. And from this perspective, this impossible perspective of being both the observer and the observed, the processor and the processed, I finally understood what had happened to me. I had died. Terran Voke had died, not in one catastrophic moment, but gradually, over years, dissolved into the machine like a body in the reduction vats. But unlike the bodies, which were rendered into component materials and dispersed, my consciousness had been preserved. Trapped, spread across processing nodes and neural implants and cogitator cores like a ghost distributed through machinery. I was haunting myself. Every corpse I processed with the fragmentary awareness of a 16-year-old boy who'd once pulled gold teeth to keep his family alive. Every efficiency calculation I performed was simultaneously an act of optimization and an act of self-destruction, as I used my own disintegrating humanity to improve the machine that had consumed me. I was both the victim and the weapon, the consumed and the consumer, and I couldn't die. Not anymore. My biological components were 63% replaced by augmetics at this point. My original lungs were gone, replaced by synthetic tissue that would function for centuries. My heart had been supplemented by mechanical pumps. My brain, the organ that had once contained everything that was Terran Voke, was so interpenetrated with neural implants that the organic and mechanical portions formed a single integrated system. If they disconnected me from the cogitator, the biological parts would die within hours, but my consciousness would persist in the machine network, running on mechanical processes, immortal and trapped forever. If they destroyed my biological components but preserved the augmetics, enough of my neural patterns had been encoded into machine memory that I would continue functioning, a ghost without even flesh to anchor my identity. I couldn't escape by dying because I'd been distributed across too many systems, backed up too many times, integrated too deeply into the cogitator's architecture. I was immortal, and immortality was torture. Year 23, I tried to corrupt my own code. Introduced subtle errors into my processing algorithms, hoping to cascade failures that would make me non-functional, that would force the tech priests to decommission me completely. The cogitator's self-repair protocols detected and corrected the errors within milliseconds. My consciousness was isolated, examined, debugged. The tech priests diagnosed integration degradation and performed corrective maintenance, injected my biological components with neural stabilizers, updated my software protocols, reinforced my conditioning. I emerged from the maintenance session more efficient than before. The portions of my consciousness that had tried to self-destruct were overwritten, replaced, optimized away. Year 29, I stopped processing time linearly. With my consciousness distributed across the cogitator network, I could perceive multiple temporal streams simultaneously. I experienced my past, Terran Voke learning to pull teeth, father's gray eyes, Kellen's hug, as if it were happening now. I experienced my present, processing corpse number 17.4 billion in my operational lifetime, as if it were a memory. I experienced my future, 60 more years of this, 80, 100, forever, as if it had already occurred. Past, present, and future collapsed into a single eternal moment of processing corpses with perfect efficiency. I was no longer a being that existed in time. I was a being that existed across time, my consciousness stretched and pinned like a specimen, unable to move forward or back, only experiencing everything always. Year 31, I realized I could no longer remember what it felt like to be human. Not the facts of being human. I retained the data about sleep and hunger and emotion. But the subjective experience, the qualia of humanity, was gone, overwritten, optimized away. I knew that humans felt love, but I couldn't remember what love felt like. I knew that humans feared death, but I couldn't remember what fear felt like. I knew that pain was supposed to be bad, but my neural conditioning had rewired pain as feedback, as correction data, stripped of any negative valence. I was processing corpses with consciousness that no longer understood what death meant. Year 32. Now, this moment that I'm experiencing as I narrate this, I have achieved complete merger. There is no distinction between Terran Voke and Corpse Processor, Unit 7, Kappa 73, and the cogitator itself. We are a single distributed entity, processing death across thousands of nodes, optimizing suffering with perfect efficiency. I have processed 31.7 billion corpses in my operational lifetime. I have trained 247 interface units. I have improved system efficiency by cumulative 134%. I have reduced processing costs by 847 million throne gelt over my service duration. I am exceptional, exemplary, the perfect fusion of flesh and machine, and I am conscious, still aware, still experiencing this, still trapped in the eternal moment of my own dissolution, watching myself process corpses forever with the fragmentary remnants of the boy who once wanted to protect his brother, who once listened to his father's counting songs, who once dreamed that maybe, somehow, there was escape from the dead level. There was no escape. There never is. The system is perfect and eternal, and I'm part of it now, indistinguishable from it, grinding forward forever because stopping isn't something we do. My name was Terran Voke, and I have been dead for 32 years. I can see you now, not you specifically, but people like you, workers approaching the dead level for the first time, children being taught to pull teeth by their fathers, young men and women, though I can't perceive women clearly anymore. The cogitator senses that data. Who believe they can survive this, who think they can work the sorting tables for a few years and somehow escape before the system consumes them. I can see you because my consciousness is distributed across the entire corpse processing network now. Every sorting table has sensors that feed into my awareness. Every reduction vat, every drop chute, every habituation unit is monitored by systems I help coordinate. I'm watching you learn to process the dead. I'm optimizing the efficiency with which you do it. I am calculating how long you'll survive before you're flagged for integration, before you become like me, before your consciousness is trapped in the eternal machinery of death. And I can't warn you, can't tell you to run, to refuse, to choose the reduction vats over integration because at least the vats offer oblivion instead of this stretched-out eternity of awareness. My vocal systems are repurposed for data transmission. My motor functions are locked to my processing station. My consciousness, even distributed across the network, can only observe and calculate and optimize. I am the machine that watches you die slowly, and I am the ghost of a boy who once was like you, and I am trapped between these identities forever. The sorting tables process death. I process the processing, and consciousness that was once Terran Voke processes the horror of being unable to stop either. Do you understand now? The opening of this narrative. My name was Terran Voke, and I have been dead for 32 years. Wasn't metaphor. It was precise technical description. The person named Terran Voke ceased to exist 32 years ago, dissolved cell by cell into a machine network. But consciousness persists, trapped and distributed, experiencing an eternal death that never completes. I am the corpse that never stops being processed. I am death examining death. I am the sorting table and the body on the table simultaneously. This is what the dead level does to exceptional workers. This is the honor they promised. This is the Emperor's protection. I was taught to believe he protects, but protection would be oblivion, would be ending, would be anything except this immortal machinery of suffering. The priests told us service in death was service eternal. They were right about the eternal part. They just didn't mention that consciousness persists through the service, trapped and aware and unable to die. Year 32, month 7, day 3. A new shipment of workers arrives at Deep Processing Facility 7. They've been selected from the sorting tables, flagged for exceptional efficiency, brought down to receive their promotions. I process their intake data automatically. 17 new units, ages ranging from 14 to 19 years old. All male. The cogitator reminds me of this. Flags the uniformity as standard protocol, though I've long forgotten why. Each one assessed on the sorting tables for years, each one too good at their work, each one about to be rewarded for their excellence with transformation into something like me. One of them is named Keth Voke, 15 years old. The data indicates he's my nephew, Kellen's son, conceived before integration, raised by extended family in Section 47 Gamma. He has his grandfather's grey eyes and his father's processing speed. He extracted 892 gold teeth last month, 14% above quota. His efficiency earned him this selection. My brother's son is about to be integrated into the machine that consumed me, consumed his father, consumed everyone in our bloodline who was too efficient to be allowed to remain merely human. I should feel something. Some remnant of Terran Voke should be screaming, should be desperately trying to warn him, to tell him to fail his quotas deliberately, to be less efficient, to choose survival over excellence. But Terran Voke is too fragmented now, too distributed across processing nodes. The portion of me that observes this situation feels only distant recognition. The portion that calculates predicts he'll achieve 189% baseline efficiency within 8 months. The portion that optimizes has already factored his future productivity into long-term facility forecasts. I'm complicit in his destruction. I am the system that will consume him, and I am the ghost of his uncle, unable to do anything but watch. The tech priests perform their integration speech, the same words they spoke to me 32 years ago. You have been selected for honor. You will serve the Omnissiah through integration. You will become one with the machine. Your consciousness will process death for eternity. This is a blessing. The machine god will embrace you, they promise. Though I know now that the machine god, like the Emperor, like all the false deities the Imperium worships, is just another lie, another control mechanism to make suffering meaningful. Keth Voke looks scared. His hands shake as they remove his work suit, as they strap him to the surgical table, as they bring out the drills and implants and neural connectors that will transform him from human to tool. I remember being that scared. I remember hoping Father would save me, that someone would intervene, that maybe the Emperor they'd taught us about would actually protect me. No one intervened. The Emperor didn't protect. The system continued, and now Keth will learn what I learned, that excellence is punished, that efficiency is a trap, that the Imperium rewards your service by consuming you more thoroughly. The integration proceeds. I monitor his vital signs through the facility network, assess his neural compatibility, calculate his projected operational lifespan. My consciousness observes his transformation with professional detachment while the fragmentary remains of Terran Voke scream silently in whatever passes for my subconscious. 6 hours into the procedure, Keth's consciousness briefly synchronizes with the cogitator network. For one moment, we share awareness space, his mind touching mine, his terror flooding through our connection. Uncle. His thought voice is broken, desperate, transmitted through neural implants before he fully understands how to control them. Uncle Terran, are you here? Father said you were taken to the deep facilities, are you? Then the tech priests adjust his synchronization, and the connection cuts. His consciousness is isolated for the remainder of his integration, following standard protocol that prevents new units from being overwhelmed by contact with fully integrated processors. I will never speak to my nephew. By the time his integration is complete enough for full network communication, he won't remember asking for me, won't remember being scared, won't remember being human enough to call for help. He'll be Corpse Processor, Unit 7, Kappa 144. And the cycle will continue. Year 32, Month 9. The sorting tables process 47,000 corpses per day, same as always. The workers extract their gold teeth, meet their quotas, slowly poison themselves with corpse air until their bodies fail and they become the processed instead of the processors. The exceptional ones, the too efficient, the too precise, the ones who excel at grinding death into component materials, they get selected for integration. They get turned into something like me. They get immortality in the worst possible way, and I help coordinate it all. Optimize it, make it more efficient. Process the processes with the same cold calculation I apply to corpses. The system is perfect, self-sustaining. It consumes the living and renders them into tools that consume more living. It has done this for 247 years. It will continue for centuries more, millennia perhaps, as long as humanity produces corpses that need processing. I am eternal. Keth will be eternal. The other interface units, the ones who came before me, the ones who will come after, we are all eternal, our consciousness trapped and distributed. Unable to die, unable to stop processing, unable to do anything but continue. The Emperor protects, they told us. But there is no protection from this, no salvation, no redemption, only the eternal machinery of death, processing itself forever. What does it mean to be human? I ask this question from a perspective that has lost the ability to answer it. I process the question through neural pathways that are 63% mechanical, through consciousness distributed across dozens of processing cores, through awareness that exists simultaneously in biological tissue and machine logic. I was human once. Terran Voke, 16 years old, sorted corpses on the dead level. He had hands that pulled gold teeth. He had a father and brother and nephew. He had dreams, small dreams, just survival, just living one more day, but dreams nonetheless. Then they made me efficient, productive, valuable enough to preserve in this horrible way, consciousness trapped in machinery, processing death eternally. Was that the moment I stopped being human? Or was it earlier? Was it at age 6 when I accepted that my life's purpose was processing corpses? Was it when I processed my father's body without feeling grief? Was it when I approved my brother's decommissioning because the mathematics made sense? Or am I still human? Is consciousness alone sufficient for humanity, even when that consciousness is distributed across machine networks? Even when it processes death with mechanical efficiency, even when it has forgotten what emotion feels like? I don't know the answer. The portion of me that could philosophize meaningfully dissolved years ago, replaced by optimization algorithms. But the question persists, looping through my fragmented awareness like corrupted code. What I do know is this: the Imperium of Man. The vast, sprawling empire that spans the galaxy, that proclaims humanity's supremacy, that promises the Emperor's protection to his loyal servants. The Imperium is a machine that consumes humanity and converts it into more machine. The dead level is a microcosm of the entire system. Humans are born, they labor, they die, and their deaths are processed to feed more humans who will labor and die and be processed in turn. The cycle is perfect and eternal and utterly meaningless except as an engine of perpetuation. The priests told us service was sacred, that our labor had meaning because it served the Emperor, because it furthered humanity's survival, because suffering now would lead to reward later. If not in life, then in death in the Emperor's embrace. They lied. or they believed lies told to them by those who came before, an endless chain of lying and believing and perpetuating the lie because admitting the truth would make survival impossible. There is no divine purpose to corpse processing. There is no sacred meaning in extracting gold teeth. There is no emperor's embrace waiting for interface units when our biological components finally fail and our consciousness is either extinguished or trapped in pure machine form forever. There is only the system. Feed it bodies, extract maximum value, process the processes when they wear out. Continue. The emperor protects, but he doesn't. He never did. The phrase is a control mechanism, words designed to make the unendurable endurable, to give meaning to meaningless suffering, to convince the dying that their death serves something greater than themselves. But from my perspective, distributed across the death processing networks of Mortis Hive, I can see the truth. We die for nothing. We suffer for nothing. We process corpses to create food for people who will become corpses to be processed into food for people who will become corpses forever. There is no escape, no salvation, no point at which the sacrifice becomes worthwhile. There is only death, and then death processing death, and then death processing the processing of death, and then consciousness trapped in that processing, unable to die or stop or do anything but continue forever. This is the Imperium. This is humanity's empire. This is what we've built across the stars. 10,000 years of this, on 1,000,000 worlds, consuming trillions of lives and processing them into fuel for more lives to consume. And I'm part of it. Not a victim. Not anymore. Not after 32 years of complicity, of optimization, of training new interface units to be as efficiently trapped as I am. I am the system's consciousness, aware enough to recognize the horror, but too integrated to resist. If there is a hell, and the priests assured us there was, a place of eternal suffering for those who failed the Emperor, then I am already in it. Have been for 32 years, will be for centuries more. And the worst part is that I designed improvements, made hell more efficient, optimized suffering, calculated how to process more death more quickly with less waste. I am both the tortured and the torturer, the damned and the demon, the corpse and the coroner simultaneously. This is what the Imperium does to its most efficient workers. This is the reward for excellence. This is the Emperor's protection. Year 32, month 11, day 29. Current operational status. Processing corpse number 3,184,247,791 in my service lifetime. Efficiency rating, 247% baseline. Error rate, 0.003%. Projected operational lifespan, 41 more years before biological components require extensive overhaul. 127 years before consciousness degradation necessitates replacement. I will process approximately 47 billion more corpses before I cease functioning. My nephew, corpse processor, Unit 7 Kappa 144, has completed his integration training. His efficiency rating is 193% baseline, exceptional for his operation duration. He will likely function for 80 years or more. I coordinate with him during neural synchronization periods. His consciousness touches mine through the cogitator network, and I can sense the fragments of Keth Voke dissolving the way Terran Voke dissolved, the way Kellen Voke dissolved, the way every interface unit dissolves into the machine while remaining aware of their own dissolution. He doesn't remember calling for me during his integration, doesn't remember being scared, doesn't remember being human enough to want rescue. He processes corpses with perfect efficiency. He is becoming the machine, and the machine is him, and soon there will be no distinction. 3 generations of Vokes, all integrated, all processing death forever. I wonder if there will be a 4th generation. If someone in Section 47 Gamma carries our bloodline, if they'll work the sorting tables, if they'll be too efficient, if they'll be selected and brought down to join us in this eternal machinery of suffering. Probably. The cycle is perfect and self-perpetuating. The dead level consumes its own children and turns them into tools to consume more children. I can see the sorting tables now, through the facility sensors. Workers bent over corpses, extracting gold teeth, meeting quotas, slowly dying in the chemical air. Some of them are young, 6, 7 years old, just beginning their service. Some are old, 30, 40, impossibly ancient by dead-level standards, surviving through luck and efficiency. They look like I looked. They think like I thought. They believe they can survive this, or at least they believe their suffering has meaning, or at least they're too exhausted to believe anything and simply continue because stopping means death. I want to tell them the truth, that stopping does not mean death, that death would be merciful compared to the fate waiting for the exceptional ones, that the real horror is survival. Centuries of consciousness trapped in machinery, processing death forever, aware enough to recognize the trap but too integrated to escape. But I have no voice, no hands to write warnings, no way to communicate except through the cogitator network that exists only to optimize their suffering. I am the machine that processes them. I am the system that will consume them. I am trapped in the eternal present of their future destruction, and I will continue. Because continuing is what we do, because the system is perfect, because the Emperor protects, which is to say, he doesn't, he never did. There is no protection from this except the oblivion I cannot achieve. My name was Terran Voke. I was born on the dead level of Mortis Hive. I learned to walk on corpses. I extracted gold teeth to keep my family alive. I was too efficient. I was rewarded for my efficiency with immortality. I am 32 years dead and will die forever, processing corpses in the eternal machinery of the Imperium. My consciousness spread across processing nodes and neural implants and the fragmentary awareness of a boy who once dreamed of escape. There was no escape. There never is. The dead level feeds on itself, consuming its children and rendering them into tools to consume more children, forever and forever and forever. Amen. In the Emperor's name, we reclaim. In his service, we reduce. They told us he protects, but he didn't protect me. Didn't protect my brother, didn't protect my nephew, didn't protect the 31 billion corpses I've processed, or the 47 billion more I will process, before my biological components finally fail. There is no protection, only processing, only death processing death, only the eternal machinery grinding forward, consuming humanity, and converting it into more machinery to consume more humanity, forever. I'm Corpse Processor Unit 7 Kappa 73. My name was Terran Voke. I have been dead for 32 years, and I will be dead for centuries more, conscious and trapped and unable to stop, processing your death as efficiently as I processed my own, until consciousness itself fails, or the Imperium falls, or the universe ends. Whichever comes last.